Alright, so today we're going to begin the chapter on sequences and series. This is a pretty short chapter. We don't cover like a whole lot that's earth-shattering, but it's good to know anyway. So we're going to be answering the question, how can you represent the terms of a sequence explicitly and recursively? I'm going to be mostly focusing on the explicitly. I'll introduce you to recursively just so that you're aware of it. We're going to identify mathematical patterns found in a sequence and use a formula to find the nth term of a sequence. So for our vocab, a sequence is an ordered list of numbers. So just any list of numbers is a sequence. Each number in a sequence is called a term of the sequence, so each number individually. An explicit formula describes the nth term of a sequence using the number n. So it's a formula to say this is how you find term whatever you want. And then a recursive formula relates each term after the first term to the term before it. So we're going to look at from term 4 to term 3, like what happens, and term 7 to term 6, what happens there until we can find a pattern. Alright, a sequence has an explicit formula, a sub n equals 3n minus 2. What are the first 10 terms of this sequence? So if you want to define the first term, we're looking at a sub 1. So then we just plug in 1 for n. So 3 times 1 minus 2, so 3 minus 2 is 1. A sub 2, we plug in 2 for n. So we get 6 minus 2, which is 4. And we're going to continue through the 10th term. Alright, so let's see. So a sub 3 would be 3 times 3, which is 9 minus 2, which is 7. A sub 4 is 3 times 4, which is 12 minus 2, which is 10. A sub 5 is 3 times 5, which is 15. 15 minus 2 is 13. A sub 6, 6 times 3 is 18, minus 2 is 16. A sub 7, that's 21 minus 2, which is 19. You should be seeing a pattern. Do you see what's happening each time? We're adding 3. So a sub 8 is going to be 19 plus 3, which is 22. A sub 9, add 3 is 25. A sub 10, add 3 is, 28. So the first 10 terms are 1, 4, 7, 10, 13, 16, 19, 22, 25, 28. Pretty simple. Alright, so writing a recursive definition for a sequence. So looking at this pattern, so based on a two-dimensional pyramid, the sequence follows a recursive formula. What is a recursive definition for the sequence? So we need to compare what's happening with 1 to the one before it. So if we look at our first one here, this is term 1. Term 1 is 1 block. Term 2 is 3 blocks. Term 3 is 6 blocks. Term 4 is 10 blocks. Term 5 is 15 blocks. And then term 6 is 21 blocks. So if we look at that, we need to remember recursive formula is taking 1 and looking at the one before it. So what's happening from term 2 to term 1? Well, we have a difference of 2 blocks. What's happening from term 3 to term 2? Well, we have a difference of 3 blocks. What's happening from term 4 to term 3? We have a difference of 4 blocks. Do you notice the pattern? See, what's happening is we have our 1 up here, and then for each one, we're adding whatever our next term is. So we start with 1, we added 2, then we add 3 to each of them. Then we add 4 to each of them, and so on and so forth. There's 5, and there's 6. So they're all there. Alright, so now that we know what our pattern is, we can write a formula based on that knowledge. Okay, so we're going to look at the block pattern, can subtract the consecutive terms, and then so we have whatever term we have minus the one before it. So remember, we compare 1 to the one before it. So that's why it's a sub n, that's one term, minus a sub n minus 1. So if you subtract the term before it, what you get is whatever term you're on. So term 2 is 3. Minus 1 is 2. So that gives you your answer. And then to write it as a recursive definition, we just have to define what our first term is. So what our first term is. So a sub 1 equals 1, because there's a 1 block there. I'm not going to have you do a lot of these recursive ones. And then writing an explicit formula. This one's a little challenging, especially the way that the book wrote it. So it's looking at that same formula that we had before, except now we're going to do it explicitly. And what they did was they rewrote it so that it's 1 plus 2, 1 plus 2 plus 3, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and then all the way to some n term. So if we wanted to find what the nth term is, we have n, the term before it's going to be n minus 1, and the term before that is going to be n minus 2, because it's just some number. So one term before, two terms before, the one before that would be n minus 3. And what they did was they rewrote it in opposite order. So instead of ascending, they wrote it in descending order. And they added both of these two together. So when you have a sub n and you add another a sub n, you have two a sub n's. And if you look, each one of these is, if you added them together, is n plus 1. So this is n plus 1. And then if you have n minus 1 plus 2, you have n plus 1. And then if you have n minus 2 plus 3, you have n plus 1. So they were just looking at the pattern that it makes when you add the two of them together. So that's where they get this, which you can also rewrite as n times n plus 1. And then if you just solve for a sub n, divide both sides by 2, you get 1/2 n times the quantity n plus 1. I am not going to test you on doing something like this, just because it's so different and quite honestly a little bit challenging. Alright, so let's make a formula and find the terms of a sequence. Pierre began the year with an unpaid balance of $300 on his credit card. He did not realize that the company charged 1.8% interest each month on his unpaid balance, in addition to a $29 penalty any month that he fails to make a minimum payment. Pierre ignored his credit card bill for 4 months, which I'm just going to tell you up front is not a good thing to do, before deciding to pay off the balance. How much money does he owe now? Alright, so we need to look at what's important here. So we started off with $300 that he owed a company because he already had borrowed the money. And every month they charge you 1.8% interest for what you haven't paid. And then they charge you $29 for every month that he didn't make a payment. So for 4 months, he just completely ignored this bill. So he got interest the first month, and they charge a $29 penalty. So in the second month, they take all those things together, and they charge another interest with another $29 penalty.